Hi everybody. So we're going to take a look at Intasc 9 really quick. So Intasc 9 and 10 are definitely standalone standards as far as comparing them or using vocabulary from other standards. So you can kind of think about these uh, as compartmentalized, kind of away from any of the influence that you've gotten from the other reflections to this point. So Standard 9, as you can see, is a professional learning and ethical practice. And the standard itself reads that the teacher engages in ongoing professional learning and uses evidence to continually evaluate his or her practice, that's our second point, particularly the effects of his or her choices and actions on others, that's our another point, including learners, families, other professionals, and the community, and adapts practice to meet the needs of each learner. So that's kind of our fourth point right there. So we really have 4 points. This idea of ongoing professional learning, and this kind of takes place in a few different varieties. Let me get my mouse here. We can have some things when you're a teacher like professional development. You ever been in school and you had those days off or days where you had half days or got off an hour early or something like that? For teacher meetings, this is what was happening, where teachers would go and they would talk about relevant things, and sometimes they'd have speakers come in and give presentations and such like that. That's basically professional development. Also, you can get professional development in the form of, or you can get ongoing professional learning, that is, in the form of continuing ed. And a lot of universities offer this for people who are professionals, but they just want to either know or get in on some new trend in the field. And then lastly, this idea of professional organizations. And then almost as important, if not more important, is the journals that go along with it. So basically, so we have CEC, which is Council for Exceptional Children. You guys can be members of the SCEC, Student Council for Exceptional Children. And basically, this is a professional organization for special educators, and they put out a publication, Teaching Exceptional Children, or TEC. You guys may have looked at that portion in Blackboard and saw that we have a whole database of articles in there. But anyways, what the journal is a place for professionals and researchers in our field to be able to get their new findings or potentially replications of other or previously considered theories or things like that, where they would look at them again to see if it would test the same way a second time. So basically you can get either A, what's new, or B, you can get some updates on old theoretical issues. So there's lots of good stuff in the journal, and that's definitely a way that you can have this ongoing professional learning taking place. So anyways, going back to the standard, that's the first point, this idea of ongoing professional learning. Okay, the second point is this idea of reflecting or evaluating one's practice. That's just this idea of reflection, and you guys are probably doing this, well, you're definitely already doing this with your, let's put this down to the next page. You guys are definitely doing this with your Intasc reflections. Let's put this down a little bit here. Very good. And then also when you guys are getting into your observation assignments, you're also going to be evaluating other people's practice, but when you guys get into your own practicums, you're going to be doing things like videotaping yourself and basically observing yourself, as well as getting feedback from outside people, so you can kind of make that decision on how you're doing. And then you can also use some kind of self-awareness techniques of just being aware of let's say like using good formative assessment just throughout the course of the assignment, just to make sure that kids are understanding kind of the step before you move on to the next step or things like that. Whether you felt that when do kids get lost in an assignment, I mean, that's a pretty important question, especially when assignments or when lessons go bad. You're going to learn a lot more from the lessons that go bad than the lessons that go well, and the only way that you're going to really learn is to properly attribute your own failure and not really even understand or kind of like rationalizing it as a failure on your part, just that you're trying something out. And this idea of like a craft, which teaching kind of is, it's really a mixture of art and science. We kind of have to understand what works and what works for us. So I mean, that's really why we need to look at what we do after the fact of doing it, so we can kind of make those decisions. Okay. This third point, effects of choices on others. This is kind of, I put, let's see, this one right here, which is 9L. This purple standard that the teacher takes responsibility for student learning and uses ongoing analysis. This is the same, this is a great indicator if you wanted to use this purple one right here, 9L. If you wanted to somehow link that to a statement in the main standard up here, it would be through this main idea of it, which is the idea of effects of choices on others. To remember that at the end of the day, we are ultimately creating a product, as it were, which is transfer of knowledge or concepts, if you will, from us to our students. And of course, everybody learns differently, and we've been talking a lot about that already. And people have different learning styles and things like that. At the end of the day, a student's success or failure, at least in the classroom, depends a lot on us. Even if things didn't go as well as you thought they would, and let's say it was like this is going to happen quite a bit. You have a grade standard topic or subject, and you kind of get this feeling of frustration on your part where it's like, well, the standard says they should be able to do it, or I've had past years people be able to do it. And what we've done is then we've taken basically, this is where this standard key point comes in. We basically attributed our own, let's say like failure, our own frustration with our students not responding in a, within our own personal opinion of idea of like acceptable ways for how our students should respond to how we do things. It's not exactly how it works. And not everybody necessarily comes with an instruction manual either. So we're going to have to do some of that detective work ourselves. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to attribute any of our failure onto the kids as much as possible, because there's not really, there's only so much that we can do about that. Really what we can control more is how can we adapt, how can we change, how can we make things more relative, or do we need to put more prerequisite, let's say like foundational information in before we kind of get started on stuff, or what do we need to do? And that really falls on us, it doesn't fall on them. And then the last one is this idea of adapting practice. We kind of touched on this already, the idea that especially using formative assessment, this idea of in-class questioning, just seeing how kids are doing and where kids are, we can make, first of all, real-time decisions. Then if we use, let's say, like pre-tests, or let's say like our end of court or end of lesson independent practice, or potentially let's say like curricular-based measure or tests, information like that, we may have to, let's say like, make a decision based on our pacing, or our problem selection, or how we're spending our time in class, or let's say like the independent practice exercises or things like that that you may be assigning. Maybe you need to do more remedial, more like practice, where you're practicing the process and practicing the steps and things like that, rather than possibly give kids that are doing really well more word problems where they're going to have to pull and discriminate relevant data and pull that out. So anyways, you basically adjust your practice, not to overcomplicate it. Basically, if you see things that need to change, you're not going to be stuck in a rut. You're going to make those changes, and the quicker that you make it, the better. Okay, so just really fast on these indicators, just to give you guys the main idea. This 9A, teacher engages in ongoing learning opportunities, and that's really any of these different things up here: professional development, continuing ed, looking at journals and articles, going to conferences, all that good stuff. It's basically what 9A is about. 9E, this is this whole idea of reflective practice. The teacher reflects on his or her personal bias and accesses resources to deepen his or her own understanding of. Hey guys, I had a hiccup there, but basically this one is this idea of reflective practice. You're doing this with your Intasc standards. Anytime you do a lesson, afterwards you're going to reflect on it and see how it goes. You want to be able to isolate the things that you're not doing well so you can address those, that you're not doing those as you go forward. And that's ultimately how we become better teachers in general, to ultimately improve our teaching. Okay, this green standard, 9J, this is about law. And since this is special ed, this is really important for us because we are basically trying to comply to, and also to a certain extent enforcing, this IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act legislation, which is federal law. We also have things such as like FERPA, which is educational right to privacy for students, and like sealing of student records and confidentiality and all that good stuff. This is why in 331 we spent time this week specifically talking about how we have to blur faces of children that we don't have specific consent to film for our artifacts or things like that. It's because of FERPA. Kids have the right to go to school and not have to be identified or potentially exposed from an identity standpoint by us. So anyways, but 9J also goes to any sort of other law like IDEA, which is a pretty natural fit for us. And then lastly, this idea of 9L, that the teacher takes responsibility for student learning, which goes to this idea of attribution, which is the effects of choices on others right here. Well, what we do affects our students. So if we're not reaching our students, what do we not know about them? Well, I mean, that's really it. If we're not reaching them, what don't we know about our students that's making it hard for us to reach them? And understand that ultimately it's our responsibility and not theirs to figure that out. I mean, although we may be, picking their brain or getting information from them, we have to communicate with them that's going to allow them to, feel comfortable, and then also possibly be prompted in a specific enough way that could possibly get students to give you that missing piece of information that's going to help you. So anyways, these four are pretty straightforward. For Intasc 9, we have the 4 points that are pretty straightforward. That's pretty much going to do it. So best of luck on your stuff. You guys are doing very well, so there's no need to worry about anything, but keep up the good work and email me with any questions.